Here we go. Another one. I got another one for you guys. All right. You guys gonna love this one. This is posted by the Atlantic. Uh, Here's the headline: what would it take to convince Americans that the economy is fine? So when you're struggling to pay your bills and your rents and put gas in your car and feed your kids and your family, what is it gonna take to convince you that it's fine? Everything is just fine. When it comes to prosperity, Americans trust feelings more than facts. By Roge Karma. Posted on February 14th, 2024. Let's start reading. What was the worst moment for the American economy in the past half century? You might think it was the last wheezy months of the 1970s when oil prices more than doubled, inflation reached double digits, and the U.S. sank into its second recession of the decade, or the 2008 financial collapse and the Great Recession, or perhaps it was when hit and millions of people abruptly lost their job. All good guesses and all wrong if surveys of the American public are to be believed. According to the University of Michigan surveys of consumers, the most widely cited measure of consumer sentiment, that moment was actually June 2022. Inflation hit 9% that month, and no one knew if it would go higher still. A recession seemed imminent. Objectively, it's hard to claim that the economy was in worse shape that month than it had been at the other cataclysmic times. But substantial pessimism was nonetheless explicable. Over the next 18 months, however, the economy improved rapidly, they claim. This was, they're talking about from June 2022 over the next 18 months, so over the next year and a half, by at the start of 2024, the economy has improved rapidly, they say, and in nearly every way. Inflation plummeted to near its pre-pandemic level. Unemployment reached historic lows. GDP boomed. I love these terms. And wages rose. The turnaround by most standard economic measures was unprecedented. So when I go to major urban areas and there's a bunch of homelessness and everyone is just on drugs and people aren't paying, they can't pay their rent or they're living on the road, on the street, they're saying I'm wrong. They're saying I'm wrong. The turnaround by most standard economic measures was unprecedented. Yet the American people continue to give the economy the kind of approval ratings traditionally reserved for used car salesmen. Hey, I take offense to that. My daddy was a used car salesman. Last June, the White House launched a campaign to celebrate Bidenomics. The administration's strong job creation record and big investments in manufacturing and clean energy. You see, guys, you can just invent words now. Bidenomics. You can just invent words and then get a pat on the back. That's how America works, guys. The effort flopped so badly within months, Democrats were begging the president to abandon it altogether. Some kind of irreconcilable difference seemed to have opened up between public opinion and traditional markers of economic health. You don't say. As many op-eds, I keep running into this. Anyway, I'm going to find out what that means. And news reported noted, the economy is great. Why are Americans in such a rotten mood? Why are you in such a rotten mood? The economy is great. Gaslighting. The Wall Street Journal asked in early November, what's causing bad vibes in the economy? What's your bad vibe? The New York Times wondered a few weeks later. It's like they're just shoving it in your face, like, just eat it. Just pay $10 for that gallon of gas, just let it be. Terms like vibe session and the great disconnect were coined and spread. Oh, we're spreading misinformation. More recently, consumer sentiment has improved. We got no choice, man. We still got to buy that bread. After falling for months, it suddenly rebounded in December and January, posting its largest 2-month gain in more than 30 years. Look, I'm telling you, you can use numbers and graphs and charts to, make it paint a pretty picture and tell everyone that it's okay, but, if you live in America, Yet, as of the writing, sentiment remains low by historical standards, nothing like the sunny outlook that prevailed before the pandemic. What's going on? The question involves the psychology of money and of politics. It's always going to come down to politics, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen? Its answer will shape the outcome of the presidential election in November, so that's what this is really about. The toll of inflation on the American psyche is undoubtedly part of the story. That people hate high inflation is not a novel observation. People don't like overpaying for shit, man. It's simple as that. You don't gotta use fancy words. The Federal Reserve has long been obsessed with preventing another 70s style inflationary spiral. Is that really what they want? Is that really what they're for? Is that really it? Its patron saint is Paul Volcker, the former Fed chair who famously broke that spiral by jacking up interest rates. So we raised your interest rates, and we will, we'll get out of the recession, man. Like, if any of that really even makes sense to you guys. I'm not an economist. You know what? If you're an economist, please educate me in the comments below. I will love to be educated, because I'm a dummy. Which plunged the economy into a recession. But although experts and political leaders know that inflation matters, the way they understand the phenomenon is very different from how ordinary people experience it. Oh, so we're just ordinary. We don't get it. We're just silly and dumb. And that alone may explain why sentiment stayed low for so long, because we don't get it, and has only now begun to rise. Tell me more. When economists talk about inflation, they are often referring to an index of prices meant to represent the goods and services a typical household buys in a year. Okay, each item in the index is weighed by how much is spent on it annually. So yeah, right. So for instance, because the average household spends about a third of its income on housing, the price of housing determines a third of the inflation rate. Okay, but the goods that people spend the most money on tend to be quite different from those that they pay the most attention to. Oh, so they're saying it's not just your rent, it's you're just buying frivolous things that you don't need. And that's why it seems like, inflation is out of control. Consumers are reminded of the price of food. You're just eating too much food, man. You gotta, eat the bugs. Every time they visit a supermarket or restaurant, and the price of gas is plastered in giant numbers on every street corner, also the purchase of these items can't be postponed. Things like a new couch or flat screen TV, in contrast, are purchased so rarely that many people don't even remember how much they paid for one. I remember paying for a small TV, I don't like giant TVs. It was what, like a 32-inch TV. Yeah, maybe not 24, it's tiny. Like a regular 32-inch TV, Walmart, $100, $150, right? Like, I'm not paying more than $150 for a TV, man. I don't love TV that much, All right, so the irony is that consumers spend a lot more on average. So, on expensive big-ticket items that they do on expensive big-ticket items than they do on groceries or takeout. Which means, can you give me an example? Let's see if they give me an example. Which means the prices we pay the most attention to don't contribute very much to overall inflation numbers. Okay, less than a tenth of the average consumer's budget is spent at the supermarket. Can you show? I don't believe it. I kind of don't believe that, actually. Some measures of inflation, core and supercore inflation among them, again, extra words, exclude food and energy prices altogether. That's what you spend most of your money on, man. You spend it on energy, food, and your rent. Like that's what you're gonna spend most of your money. They're saying, let's just not think about that. Let's just not talk about those. Okay, so that is reasonable if you're a Fed official focused on how to set interest rates. So if you're a Fed, it's fine because, you set the interest rate. Because energy and food prices are often extremely sensitive to temporary fluctuations. They're just saying it's just temporary. It's a temporary, rise in the graph. Don't be alarmed by it. But in practice, these measures overlook the prices that matter most to consumers. Like food and gas and rent. Oh yeah, all the ones that you're excluding. The dynamic alone goes a long way toward explaining the gap between the economy and Americans' perception of it. Yeah, so you fix your perception is what they're saying. Even as core inflation fell below 3% over the course of 2023, food prices increased by about 6%, twice as fast as they had grown over the previous 20 years. I think that explains a huge part of the disconnect. Paul Donovan, chief economist, he's a chief economist, he must know what he's talking about, at UBS Global Wealth Management, told me, you won't convince any consumer that inflation is under control when food prices are rising that fast. Consumers say as much when you ask them. In a recent poll commissioned by The Atlantic, polls don't give you any real... I mean, you know what, they can. I should start a poll right here. commissioned by the Atlantic. Respondents were asked what factors they considered when deciding how the national economy is doing. These people are not going to give you good answers. The price of groceries led the list, and 60% of respondents. You know what? Never mind. I stand corrected. And 60% of respondents placed it among their top three. Yeah, because if you don't eat, you die, you starve. More even then, that share that chose inflation. This isn't exactly a new development. In 2002, Donovan told me Italian consumers were convinced that prices were soaring by nearly 20%, even though actual inflation was a stable 2%. It turned out people were basing their estimates on the cost of a cup of espresso. What's more, most people don't care about the inflation rate so much as they care about prices themselves. It's correlated. It's correlated, of course. If inflation runs at 10% for a year and then suddenly shrinks to 2%, the damage of the past year has not been undone. Of course, prices are still dramatically higher than they were. Overall, prices are nearly 20% higher now than they were before the pandemic. When asked in a survey last fall what improvement in the economy they would most like to see, 64% of respondents said lower prices on goods, services, and gas. Just what I was talking about. What about wages? Even adjusted for inflation, they have been rising since June 2022 and recently surpassed their pre-pandemic levels, meaning that the typical American's paycheck, you're making plenty of money is what they're going to go saying now, goes further than it did prior to the inflation spike. You just said prices are up as well. How is it going to go further? But wages haven't increased faster than food prices. And exactly, and most people think about wage and price increases very differently. Explain to me more. A raise tends to feel like something we've earned. Now you're going on to feelings. Betsy Stevenson, an economist at the University of Michigan, told me. Then we go to the grocery store and it feels like those just rewards are being unfairly taken away. If inflation is in fact the main reason American people have been so down on the economy and its future, the story is likely to have a happy ending, and soon. Please tell me more. My great-grandmother loved to reminisce about the days when she when she bought a can of Coke for the cost of a nickel. Okay, yes. She didn't, however, believe the country was on the verge of economic calamity because she now had to spend $1 or more. So because her grandma or someone bought a Coke for a quarter or a nickel and now it's $1, it's like, okay, anyway. Just as surely as people despise price increases, we also get used to them in the end. So just get used to being poor, peasants. A recent analysis by Ryan Cummings and Neil Mahoney, two Stanford economists and former policy advisors in the Biden administration, found that it takes 18 to 24 months to lower inflation. They don't mean to lower, they just mean to get rid of, weave out all the really poor people, to fully really show up in consumer sentiment. People eventually adjust, Mahoney told me, or they die. They just don't adjust at the rate and statistical agencies produce inflation data. Hang on, let me reread that. They just don't adjust at the rate that statistical agencies produce inflation data. Mahoney and Cummings posted their study on December 4th, 2023, 18 months after inflation peaked in 2022. Clowns. As if it was on cue. Of course it was. Consumer sentiment began surging that month. Perhaps helping matters. Okay, I'm going to read that. There is another story you can tell about consumer sentiment today, however. One that has less to do with what's happening in grocery stores and more to do with the peculiarities of tribal identity. Here is where we're going to go into the politics section of the article, ladies and gentlemen. It's well established that partisans on both sides become more negative about the economy when the other party controls the presidency. So they're going to go on to say that all of this outrage is the Republicans outraging just because their electorate or their man isn't in office. It's Biden that's in office. This is what they're going to argue, and I haven't even read this. This is the first time reading this. It's well established that partisans on both sides become more negative about the economy when the other party controls the presidency. Right, but this phenomenon is not symmetrical. In a November analysis, Mahoney and Cummings found that when a Democrat, so they're gonna excuse their Democratic, their Democratic side. The Democratic team, if you will, found that when a Democratic occupies the White House, Republicans' economic outlook declines by more than twice as much as Democrats does when the situation is reversed. Consumer sentiment data from the polling from Civics and the Pew Research Center show that Republicans view of the economy has barely budged since hitting an all-time low in the summer of 2022. Yeah, because we're not idiots. Meanwhile, although sentiment among Democrats has recovered to nearly where it stood before inflation began, because you guys are sheep and silly buggers, it remains well below its level at the end of the Obama admin. It may never return to its previous heights. They're not even talking about. They're talking about how pleased the Democrats are with their representative, and they're not pleased at this time. So it's going to be hard to, appease them and get them to vote for you again. This is all they're going on about. This is all they're going on about right here. May never return to its previous heights. Over the past decade, the belief that the economy is rigged in favor for the rich and powerful has become central to progressive self-identity among Democrats ages 18 to 34, who tend to be more progressive than older Democrats. Jeez. Positive views of capitalism fell from 56 to 40% between 2010 and 2019, according to Gallup. Diminished views of the broader economic system may be limiting how positively some Democrats feel about the economy, even when one of their own occupies the Oval Office. According to a CNN poll in late January, 63% of the Democrats aged 45 and older believed that the economy was on the upswing, but only 35% of younger Democrats believe the same. To fully embrace the economy's strength would be to sacrifice part of the modern progressives' ideological sense of self. Jeez, I am reading. This is a long one. The media may be contributing to economic gloom. This is a form of media, though. What I'm reading for people of every political stripe, according to Mahoney, one possible explanation for Republicans' disproportionate economic negativity when a Democrat is in office is the fact that the news sources many Republicans consume, namely right-wing media like Fox News, tend to be more brazenly partisan than the sources Democrats consume. I'm reading. I'm pretty sure this is a Democrat-run page that I'm reading right now. This is the New York Times. Which tend to be a balance of mainstream and partisan media. But mainstream media has also gotten more negative about the economy in recent years. Yeah, they're figuring it out. Maybe. I hope so. Regardless of who's held the presidency, according to a new analysis by Brookings Institution, from 1988 to 2016, the sentiment of economic news coverage in mainstream newspaper tracked closely with measures such as inflation, employment, and the stock market. Then, during Donald Trump's presidency, coverage became more negative than the economic fundamentals. Oh, it must have been Donald Trump that did this. Have been more negative than the economic fundamentals would have been predicted. After Joe Biden took office, the gap widened. Journalists have long focused more on surfacing problems than on highlighting successes. Bringing problems to light is an essential part of the job, but more recent shift could be explained by the same economic pessimism afflicting many young liberals. In other words, the media's negativity could be both a reflection and a source of today's economic pessimism. They're probably right about that last bit, Yeah, people do consume media, and, whatever media is being presented to them, they're going to view the world accordingly, possibly. What happens to consumer sentiment in the coming months will depend on how much it is still being dragged down by frustration with higher prices, which will likely dissipate. I love how they're like, which will likely dissipate. So that when it doesn't, they're like, yeah, we said likely, we didn't promise anything, I don't think so. I don't think they'll dissipate. This is, I'm not trying to have a gloomy look on the future, but you have to really realize what's going on. I'm going to continue reading. I'm going to shut up. As opposed to how much it is being limited by a combination of Republican partisanship and Democratic pessimism, which are less likely to change. You take that what you will. Will the place that it finally settles in come November matter to the election? How people say they are feeling about the economy in an election year, alongside more direct measures of economic health such as the GDP growth and disposable income, has in the past been a good predictor of whom voters choose as president. A healthy economy and good sentiment strongly favor the incumbents. Yeah, so, the way that America is right now, people are mad at Biden. People are mad at Biden. I'm not saying I'm mad at Biden, but I'm saying people are mad at Biden. And it does not reflect a sense of security or confidence in the American people to elect him again. Please leave comments down below on that. Please, if you have I think this is it. I'm pretty. Oh my! This thing goes on for a little bit longer. You know what? We already went this far. Let's just keep. Let me skip that bit. It is of course possible that consumer sentiment is becoming a more performative metric than it used to be. It's a performance art, and they're kind of showing you a little bit behind the veil because they're doing this too. A statement about who you are rather than how you really feel, and perhaps less reliable as a result. Still, the story that voters have in their heads about the economy clearly matters. If the story were influenced solely by prices at the pump and the grocery store or the number of well-paying jobs, then absent another crisis, we could expect the mood to be buoyant this fall, significantly helping Biden's prospect for re-election. So there it is. That's the conclusion. They're saying, no, don't worry, the economy will repair itself. It's on the way up. It's on the uptick. Just, trust in the Democratic Party. Please elect for Biden again. This is the point of the whole article, guys. I'm out. That's it. I'm done.